What is going on, everybody? It's your boy John, and welcome back to Gearbox. So today is an extremely shitty, ugly, rainy, all of the bad adjectives above day here in South Carolina. Oh, cold as well. I am officially over winter. Some of y'all are probably gonna be like, John, shut up. It's 36 degrees, which is pretty cold regardless of what's going on. Anyway, to get to the point of the story, today, or really a couple weeks ago, I posted a video regarding the actual tires that I'm running on this truck and, you know, my F-150, and those are the Toyo Open Country AT3s. That video was more so specific to the tread rather than, you know, the sizes and the specs of Toyo AT3 Open Countries that you could get, or any other tire for that matter. So what I wanted to do today is film a video talking specifically about wheel and tire sizes and give you guys kind of a jump start. If you just bought your F-150 and you're trying to get into the wheel and tire game, this video should help out and steer you in the right direction with the sizes and the specs, so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So before we start talking about any of this, I do want to specify that really all of the information that I am saying here today is based on my research of my 2019 Ford F-150 XLT. You know, at the end of the day, a lot of these things are still going to hold true for other F-150s, you know, models, years, etc. But this one is specific for a 2019 XLT. So just getting that out of the way. But before we talk about anything, we need to set a baseline of what wheels and tires do we start off with. So in that case, our 2019 XLT starts off with a, you know, as far as a wheel goes, a 17 by 8.5 plus 44 offset. So let's stop right there. 17 inch diameter, 8.5 width of the wheel, and plus 44 offset is the offset. Now, one thing, let's use this as an example. When talking about offset, there's always a lot of questions, and it's kind of hard to visualize or get an understanding of, so I'm hopefully going to help you here. This is the straight-on profile of your wheel, okay? So let's say this is the outside of the wheel and the inside of the wheel. If you cut the barrel of your wheel right down the middle, that's going to be a 0 offset. The further you go out is positive offset. So this would be closer to the edge of the actual truck. And the further you go in is negative offset. So what we're talking about or measuring here is the hub to which the wheel attaches to the actual you know, wheel hub assembly and brake caliper and that type of stuff. So long story short, when you are positive offset, your wheel is going to be sunk into the wheel well because of where that hub attaches. The less offset you have, you know, especially when you start getting into negative offset, that wheel is going to push out further and further from your truck. Negative offset tends to have the big polished lips and that type of stuff. So anyway, stock wheel plus 44 offset. As far as the stock tire that is on the truck, I forget the brand of which was on there, but basically it is a 27-inch radial tire. So 27 being the height and radial just being the tread pattern. It's more of a street tire. It's not, you know, an all-terrain, a mud terrain, etc., which we already talked about ad nauseum in the last video, so not going to go there. But regardless, 17-inch wheel plus 44 offset and 27-inch tire. That's going to be the baseline. Now, the vast majority of people, you know, especially when you're into modifying things and tinkering around and that type of shit, once you get your truck, I would assume wheels, tires, and probably suspension, which we'll talk about a little bit here in a minute. But wheels and tires are going to be one of the first mods you're going to want to do. So let's talk about it. at a stock suspension height, really through my research, the max wheel size that you could ever run on this truck is going to be a 33. So that is a big step up from a 27-inch radial, but it still might look a little bit weird, especially like this truck. So this is a super cab with a 6'7" bed. She's a big girl, and I feel like having 33s on it would be, I don't know, a little more to be desired, I guess. But regardless, if you don't want to trim and tear up your brand new F-150, 33s are probably going to be your bet. Odds are you'll need to trim and do some minor things, but all in all, not going to be a big deal. Now, on the same idea of dealing with stock suspension, let's talk about wheel specs. So for me, I decided to keep the same geometry of wheel, and by that I mean 17 by 8.5. Really, the only thing that I did was tinker with offset. So actually, let's go ahead and look at the offset here right now, because it's not pouring rain at this point, but it's still gonna be shitty and the lens will probably get wet. So, if you look at these wheels here, they're nice and beautiful. It would be nice if I straighten that wheel out, but you can see it in the back. This is a 0 offset wheel, and you have a little bit of poke outside of the actual wheel well. That's something that I enjoy. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but something to, once again, use as a baseline as you continue to discuss, you know, what wheels, what tires, what modifications do I want to make to my stock setup. Now, the reason I bring up my wheels and my offset is really to give you guys an understanding of what sort of poke or stance do you really want with your truck. Like I said, mine's at 0 offset, so you're gonna have just a smidge of poke, which I like, maybe you don't like. Now, if you're gonna be running 17 by 8.5 wheels and you don't prefer poke, I would probably suggest you go somewhere around the offset of 5, +5 to +10, to have it sucked in just a tad bit more, but still widening it out from the +44 offset you have on the stock wheels. So the next thing I want to talk about is going to do with actual lifts or levels of your truck. So if you guys have not been, you know, on this channel for a while, or maybe you forget, or maybe you're brand new, hello. This truck is on a 3-inch suspension lift. And the reason I ultimately went with a 3-inch suspension lift was the ability to run 35-inch tires. From my research, it's really going to be the easiest step up to go from a 33 to a 35 is having that additional 3 inches of lift, whether that's, you know, suspension lift, whether it's blocks, whatever, shouldn't really matter. But at that point, the 35s are going to fit a heck of a lot nicer than they would with any less of a lift there. Now, one thing to point out is there was some minor trimming that had to be done. Really, the big ticket item, I would say, was the, if you look in the back of the wheel wells inside, there's this little metal bar that comes across, and apparently it does absolutely nothing except ruin the perfect circular geometry of a wheel well in an F-150. So it was an easy enough, take a Sawzall to it, bada bing, bada boom, you're done. And then some minor plastic trimming here and there. I still rub a little bit, but I would not say it's bad enough to where people should stray away from a 35 on a 3-inch lift. It's mainly at full lock. Those little knobs just barely catch plastic. So that's really it. Now, some people, maybe it's you, maybe it's not, I don't know. Some people might be crazy enough to want to run 37s on their F-150. And if you do, more power to you. But through my research, this is not going to be achievable, except for, you know, outside of major modifications in other areas. This will not be possible unless you have, at minimum, a 4-inch suspension lift. So obviously, as we're adding a bigger tire in there, we start dealing with more clearance issues and, you know, this and that and whatever. And then, yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff to take into consideration here. But 37s, that's going to be a tough one. Your gas mileage is going to suck ass. But if that's what you want to do and that's what you think's the right thing, go. Really, the last thing I want to talk about here is a little bit of a convoluted point or idea. But when people start talking about, you know, lifting your truck, getting wheels, getting tires, you know, all of that type of stuff, more often than not, it's mainly for aesthetics, and a secondary objective is obviously more functionality off-road. But that's really it. You know, and that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But what I am saying is there are some additional benefits that need to be taken into consideration. And the main thing is clearance. So when you lift your truck, you know, you do a 3-inch lift. Obviously, the idea is your truck, your entire cab is going to move up 3 inches, right? So that gives you more clearance. You know, if you're going over a hill or something, you're not going to high point on a hill or whatever, and that's fine. Now, another clearance that needs to be thought of, I guess, is axle clearance. And this is not going to be achieved by a suspension lift. This is going to be achieved by larger tires. So if you think of, you know, let's say you have your tire here and this is your axle, really the only way to lift this is to go from a 27-inch tire, which might sit right about here, to a 35-inch tire, which sits about here. You know, we're only talking about a couple additional inches of lift because, you know, there's more inches on the top and more inches on the bottom. So we kind of cut it in half and call it a day. But it is something to think about depending on what type of use you want your truck to be for, right? And that's for you to decide, not me. But when you are thinking about it, when you have a mission in mind, think about it. You know, does it make sense to go from a 35 to a 37 or maybe a 37 to a 42? Probably not, but it might, right? So anyway, that is the last point I wanted to make. Like I said, it's a little bit weird and most people probably don't talk about it, but it is something to keep in consideration. Before we conclude this video, I do want to give a big shout out to customoffsets.com. You guys have probably heard me talk about them before, but really they are a kind of aftermarket truck company specializing in wheels, tires, and suspension. So if you have any questions about, you know, the offset that you want to run on your truck outside of F-150s or anything, you know, maybe your Silverado, what size wheel, what size tire, do those people have rubbing issues? Did they have to trim it all? They've got their gallery, they've got pictures to show you exactly what it's going to look like. And really, especially for the offset, in my opinion, that helps out tremendously. It is very nice to have a visual representation of, you know, what you're trying to accomplish. So anyway, if you have any questions, please make sure you do your research, and I would urge you, in order to do your research, go over to customoffsets.com. Without further ado, that is going to do it for today's video. If you liked what you saw, give this video a big fat thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I know this topic is probably going to spark a lot of conversation, and there's a lot of research and a lot of opinions and a lot of everything that goes into this conversation. Drop them in the comment section down below. I'd love to help out wherever I can, but I can't help out unless you leave a comment. As always, I shouldn't even have to say it, but hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. You know the drill. And until next time, peace.
是留在自己那张脏乱的床，手摆好姿态对我装上了。